Okay, it's my story time. Uh, I need to do this because while I'm talking about the subject, I'm not qualified in anything, and I appreciate those with qualifications and those who have published and written books. I want to, out of my empathy for knowing how hard it is to leave a narcissist if you've been in a long-term relationship, and how hard it is afterwards. I want to be there for others because I know that there was nobody there for me except another narcissist. So, I've come to see that I'm codependent. That's a good way of understanding everything I've talked about in my other uploads. So thank you to those who are uploading to YouTube. I'll put a link up, or I'll talk about, review the book. That's what I'll do. I'll review the book that I'm getting through at the moment in my next upload after I've finished the book. So, my story. I married my first boyfriend, and when I first met him, I didn't like him for good reason. I saw him being really horrible to people. He was obnoxious. He insulted me. I had no social skills, and he was ignorant and arrogant. And then one day he must have decided that I was the one. I ended up in a flat with this person. A flat is a house, all shared by people. So I rented a room. He rented a room. We weren't living together as such. I used to make the mistake of saying we were living together. We weren't living together. 8 months after we started dating, we're married. Now, I had fears and concerns, but I kept going back to that period of time where he'd changed overnight and become a charming, happy, fun-loving person who was very interested in me, who also had such an underdog story, and he attributed all his bad behaviour to the fact of how he really felt like such an underdog, and he'd been really mistreated early in his life, and his mother didn't love him, and he had all this devastating proof about the terrible things she had done to him. So he was a victim, a misunderstood victim. And I was a crisis intervention youth worker. So he was my great purpose. Blah, blah, blah. His conditioning of me started immediately after the wedding. During the wedding, actually, he told me he didn't like the wedding dress and that I was ruining the day for everybody else. I wasn't doing anything wrong at all. And then he didn't make any conversation with me at the reception table. He looked the other way. And I felt alone on my wedding day, and nobody mentioned it to me. Nobody said they noticed or saw this going on. Being a Christian from a Pentecostal background, I felt that divorce, well, God hates divorce. There's one sentence in the Bible. To put it in context and finish the paragraph and look throughout the Bible, you get quite a different picture of what Jesus was saying when he said that. And in the original text, what he was saying was quite different from what we get pounded with in church. So I didn't feel I could leave him. I felt that I had to try and fix it. But that just gave him longer, and it gave him more ammunition to use against me and manipulate me with, because I was always giving him the benefit of the doubt, hearing him out, trying to understand where he was coming from, assuming that he meant well, assuming that he meant the best. And if I ever started to get a little angry, which was the appropriate response, he would play the victim card again, end up in tears and close to a nervous breakdown because of his past life trauma and how badly he was being abused by his current employer. So he'd make me angry with his employer, and I would think it was their fault for his behaviour. Well, I hurt myself early in the marriage. I stood up underneath a concrete block that was suspended off the end of a pole, just hanging out over a yard. This was on a day when I felt I was actually being quite successful. I'd performed all my duties in our business really well because I'd gone into his business to help him with his ambition. And I hurt myself badly, and I looked for him. I was too sore to cry out. It hurt too badly to make a sound. And I thought, I have to get his attention. And I looked up and he was nearby with his hands on his hips, watching me, not blinking. His shoulders were forward and he'd sort of dipped his chin. And he was just staring at me, impassively. He'd seen. He knew. And then, so I looked at him, I looked at the ground, I broke eye contact because I felt threatened by him. I looked up again and he was still staring, so I realised I have to get back to work. I have to keep moving. I can't make a thing of this. And I gathered up the tools that I dropped and I started working again, even though my head was just ringing and I was seeing lights and I had a splitting headache. And I had this awful sense of loss rising up inside me with a sense of confusion that I just pushed down, and that numbing effect was paralysing in life. Every time I had time alone where I needed to get things done, I'd feel the sense of loss and confusion start coming back up over me because I was so trapped inside this. Then we had children together 5 years after. I didn't really want to have children with him. I got pregnant when it was discussed like that. He was like, why don't you want to have kids? Why don't you want to have kids? The reason why he wanted to have kids is because his best friend had had a child and the child got so much attention that he wanted to compete. So I got pregnant immediately with twins and also developed a disability which would remain undiagnosed or misdiagnosed for 5 years. And we started moving. We're in an industry that was seeing a bit of a boom, and that sparked his ambition. The promise was that we would return to that area or to somewhere near my extended family within 5 years of moving away. So we moved away and we didn't go back. That was 15 years ago. So, where was I? We moved a lot. We had debt, I had disability, and I had this toxic religious belief, which is not right, which is not biblical, and it is not of God, that I needed to stay in. And every time I felt unloved, I felt it was because I was not being lovable enough and I had to try harder. And that sense of loss and confusion that would simmer right down from the bottom of my abdomen right up through me and just take me down like a heavy weight over my shoulders every time I had time alone. And most people are not robust at hearing people's problems. We moved to 8 different districts, lived in about 15 different homes in the years that we were married. Just maybe not that many, 12 different homes. It was about a dozen different homes, but 8 different locations. I went to 8 different churches. I learned in the first few churches that people didn't want to know. People don't want to know. They'd see me coming with my little children and my limp and my fatigue, and they wouldn't want to hear about another problem. If I wasn't appealing or attractive as a friend as I could be, I would have been completely alone. So it fed into that cycle of projecting false success and happiness and being balanced and well put together. And I was just a brilliant actor, but behind that I was miserable. It turned out that I had a brain tumour. It was a bone tumour, though, that grew inside my brain, which it was the second time it happened internationally in the international records, and it was 60 cubic centimetres, which by volume is slightly smaller than a tennis ball, but it was globular. Most brain tumours are soft, they get imploded and then sort of pulled out, and trying not to damage the brain as you go. Of course, sometimes that's impossible because most brain tumours look like brain, so it's hard to know where it begins and ends. In my case, that wasn't so, but my brain had to be peeled off this object, and the neurosurgeon used a drill to cut it and remove it piece by piece, and those vibrations were felt throughout my brain. And that was all inside the linings of my brain that this thing grew. While I was in surgery, my husband went car shopping. He said it was for me, but actually he just got bored and we definitely needed a new vehicle. So it's just something, and it was a sudden surprise tumour. And all those years he'd been calling me lazy, and been feeding into that and acting like my victim. When in actual fact, he gave me no help at home. He just ran me down for it, and he was away 7 days a week. And when he needed help on the farm, I was on it. I was there. Disability, little kids at my knees or in the vehicles with me, I did it. So yeah, you walked into the part of our life together that I was responsible for, and it did look like a mess. All the laundry got done. I did all home-cooked meals. I did everything I had to, but the extra things that weren't so necessary, like my floor often desperately needed a sweep and a mop, really badly. It needed vacuuming, my windows needed washing. There'd often be a pile of clean laundry, not dirty laundry, sitting on the couch when people came in the door. There'd be kids' toys scattered over the floor of the other room, but my kids' beds always had sheets on them and blankets. They weren't always changed every week. But I did my very best, and actually, I look back now and think, I don't know how I did what I did, but I did. Throughout this period of time, God let me know that he loved me. That will be a different upload. He let me know in profound ways that I had intrinsic value. I had come to a belief, because I had a vision of heaven when I was a girl, but it was also developing codependency. The way that I interpreted my situation, which was not the word of God in my life, it was my word, was that I needed to develop as much credibility and be as pleasing as possible so that I could tell people about God and Jesus, and they would go to heaven and be saved and not go to hell. I didn't want to be responsible for people going to hell. I wanted to help them go to heaven. And when people didn't believe me as a child, or no difference seemed to be made by the fact that I'd had this vision of heaven, I burdened myself seriously with emphasis on the codependency attributes, being the biggest actor and not really happy on the inside. And the brain tumour took all that capability away from me. It stripped me down to my bones, which now I appreciate God for, because I still have a lot of life left. And I had the potential to act until the day I died the way that I was. And be impressive. I was very coordinated, I was strong, I was intelligent, I was creative, I was articulate, and I was fearless outwardly. But I wasn't being real. I wasn't authentic, and my authentic self was dying on the inside. I was hurt over and 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 over again in my marriage. And I watched my children being hurt too. And as I got stronger, I'd try to step in and confront. But for most of the kids' early years, I told them how somehow they were responsible for what had happened, because that's how I dealt with everything. Until one day I didn't anymore. And so, and that is what had happened to me as a child when I was being bullied in the home by one particular sibling. The bullying was supported by my most narcissistic parent, and I was made responsible for the mental health that saw me being abused and targeted. And so I used to run off into the bush as a kid and hide. I didn't call it hiding, I just used to spend a lot of time alone by myself. See this? See the bush? Anyway, I'm in a house that's in the bush now and I love it. So that's enough for now. I hope that helps somebody out there.